Hey there, my name is Shay Dean, and we are continuing a three-part series on faith here on Your Heart Matters. And today I'm going to talk to you about faith in your finances. Money is not something that people like to talk about. I have discovered the older that I get, that is one of the areas that we keep covered. Growing up, I did not have a lot, and that's kind of, I think, what you grow up in helps mold your beliefs on money. And that was definitely the case for me. We weren't by any stretch of the imagination really, really poor. We weren't below the poverty line or anything like that. We just didn't have a lot. So there wasn't a lot of learning how to manage credit or investments or anything like that because those weren't things that my parents had. I got a job when I was 16, and I worked as much as possible, which was probably twofold because I worked at a grocery store and there was a lot of cute little baggers there, so boys definitely fed into that. And then when I was 18 years old, I graduated from high school, and I received a scholarship from a retired teachers organization because I wanted to go into teaching. And I just remember being about to graduate, and that is when I kind of started realizing how much things actually could cost. My mom, I remember very vividly, my mom standing in the kitchen looking at different fees and stuff from the college I was planning on attending, and just kind of commenting on how expensive it was. And, I knew things cost money. I ate and, had a car and car insurance and things like that. But that was that first moment for me. And then I went into college, and with the help of, scholarships and that kind of thing, I had hope and from the state of Georgia. And then when I went into college, that was when it all kind of started hitting for me. I got credit cards because you go to college and that's what you get is credit cards. And all of a sudden I could do all sorts of fun stuff for like nothing, go shopping. I got a new car, just being really, really dumb with my financial decisions. I went through college, and I graduated my bachelor's in education and started teaching. And I was super excited about my pay and what I was going to make. And then I got my first paycheck and realized that it wasn't quite what I thought it was going to be. Isn't that kind of how that always works? But then, that's when the pressure was on to be a grown-up. I felt like I had to have a new car. My student loans were starting to be due, and I went back to school to get my master's degree. And all of a sudden I was buying my food. I was, paying all these things on my own. And I guess that's where my pressure kind of hit. Here's the where this really kind of all started unraveling for me was that I didn't pay my tithe. You may have grown up understanding what that is, or maybe that's something for you that you really kind of take hold of, but that was not something that I grew up doing. Like I said before, my family wasn't dirt poor, but we just didn't have a lot, and we weren't necessarily every Sunday type of Christians, or, my parents weren't, and so that wasn't something that they instilled in me. So God kind of ended up getting a $20 bill in the offering plate instead of me being intentional about what I was giving. A tithe is, the actual meaning of the word is 1/10 of an annual earnings. It was formerly taken as a tax for the support of church and clergy. And it was actually first mentioned in Genesis 14. After Abraham rescued Lot, he gave 1/10 of everything to the king of Salem. And later on, tithing was part of the Mosaic law. In the book of Malachi, it speaks a little to tithing, but mostly tithing is a heart issue. Giving is a heart issue. And I think it took me a while to realize this. I rocked along for a little while, and then the economy fell, and my parents started having some trouble. I began helping them and trying to sacrifice a little bit from my own table, which probably sounds super spiritual, but not really. I was trying to be Jesus and trying to help them out, but I wasn't trying to be Jesus in the sense that I needed to be. I was trying to help save my family and trying to control the issue. And needless to say, that didn't work out so well for me. And when I stepped back from all of it and realized that that was what I was doing, I was a little bit in a financial mess. I had a lot of credit card debt. My student loans were there. I had a car payment I couldn't afford. And it was in my late 20s and early 30s that I'd really started praying for God to bring me the man that He had for me. And knowing that God is a good God and that there were certain things that I had prayed for in a husband, and one of them being just financial stability and knowing how to handle finances, not so much being rich. Maybe that's what I should have prayed for, but knowing how to handle finances. And one night I was being super spiritual with my mother and talking to her about their financial situation and how if she would just give her tithe to God, that He would show up and take care of her. And then I sat down to start paying my bills, and God kind of spoke to me. Because, see, I wasn't being faithful in my tithe at that point still. I was giving when I could, holding on to it when I couldn't. I was talking the talk, but I wasn't walking the walk. And, sometimes there are moments where you talk to God and you argue with God. And this was one of those moments where it was very much for real. I was in tears on my bed writing out this first check. And just the entirety of it and just not knowing what was going to happen and being scared. But see, God is so faithful. And when I wrote that very first check, things started happening. Gradually, things started paying off consistently. And I cannot explain it. I wish I could. I wish that I could tell you I used a certain formula and I did X, Y, and Z, and it happened, but it wasn't like that. It was a very consistent every month. Okay, God, here's yours. And He always provided, whether it be someone paying for my meal at a restaurant or just my tires lasting longer than they should on my vehicle. He always provided for me. So I don't want to argue doctrine with you because I'm really not that smart to talk to you about the ins and outs of it. But I am going to tell you that when you hold back from God in any area, that you're not trusting Him. Mark 12 is one of my favorite Jesus moments in the Bible because he's sitting and he's watching people put their offerings in, and he's watching the crowd. And it says that many rich people threw in large amounts, but that a poor widow came and put in 2 very small copper coins worth only a few cents. And that He called to His disciples and He said, "Truly I tell you, this poor widow has put more into the treasury than all the others. They all gave out of their wealth, but she, out of her poverty, put in everything, all she had to live on." If you read before that in the book of Mark, He had just taught several different parables, but in this spot, He just sits and He watches. And I just in my mind picture Him just seeing her and seeing her heart and just feeling for her that compassion, because He knew what she had and He knew what she didn't have. And, in that moment, during that time, I was giving out of my poverty and given to God, and I was asking Him for a miracle, and He supplied one for me. When I met my husband, I was in such better shape than I could have been. But, the struggle is still there. Me and my husband are in very different places than I was then. We are percentage givers. We do so religiously. It is one of my husband's deepest convictions, and he wants to give back to God, and we do so. That is our very first check that we write, is to the church. And then we make it in between. We don't have a plethora. We have 4 kids. We have a house payment, 4 small kids. We have a house payment. We have a car payment. However, I know that God has been faithful to me in that area, and I know He's going to be faithful again. So it's not a trust issue for me anymore, because I've seen Him pan it out. My husband has not had to walk that faith out yet. I think most men in general just kind of have that I want to fix it mentality. and that's how he is. And money is the only area that I ever see him get snappy in. And it's the only area I ever really see him want to control. The other night we had this very real conversation about it, because it's just very much unlike him to get upset and to get snappy. And he told me that he wants to fix it. And I think that so many times with money, we feel like that it's what God's given us, and we want to control it, and we want to fix it, and we want to do it our way. And, that's not who God is. We have to give him our whole heart. We have to give him our trust. I'm not going to sit here and tell you how to give. If you are in debt, there are some very smart people out there who have ways to help you get out of that debt. I'm just asking that if you're struggling financially, where is your heart? I've been there. I've struggled. I've eaten the ramen noodles. I've bummed off food from friends. And I know that when I sat on my bed that night and decided that I was going to pay my tithe, that was my line in the sand, and that I'm trusting God with this. And where are you at in this? Are you trusting God with your money? Because he can be trusted. In any situation, he can be trusted. Money should not be something that we hold on to because it's ours. Pray about it and ask him to show you how he wants you to be faithful. Like I said before, I'm not going to argue the doctrine of it, that we give our 10% and that's what we give. Pray about it. Don't think about it. Don't talk about it. Don't worry about it. Just do it. Pray about it and see where God leads you in that. Malachi 3:10 says that the Lord says to test me in this. And if you test him and watch him, he'll show out in your world. He just will, because that's who God is. Thank you for hearing my heart on this. I pray that for you today. I pray that you'll learn how to trust God in this area of your life, because I think there's so many issues in our marriages and our home when we just hold on to it and don't trust him in that. Now we're going to be joined by Stephanie and Stacy just for some final thoughts on faith in your finances. Well, girls, I just finished my teaching on faith in your finances, and I was just wondering if you could tell me about a time where your faith has been stretched by your financial status.
Yes, I can. Can you, Steph?
Yes.
Who do you want to go first?
Go for it.
Okay. Well, last year, Mr. Todd, his job changed, and he went from having a job to not having a job fairly quickly. And we were waiting to find out an answer, would some money come through or not come through. And we were just talking one day about it and really trying to build one another up and say, we're going to be fine either way. God's in control. And I remember us sitting at the kitchen table, and we were just kind of going over like you said last week, the what ifs. And both of us just at the same time said, either way, God is still God. And he'll guide us and lead us and take care of us. And we just both decided we're not going to think about it anymore. We're not going to stress. We're not going to try to figure it out. We're not going to go to that place of trying to have all the answers. It's that day by day thing. And we just laughed and, went on about our day. And then probably about an hour or so later, the phone rang with the answer, and we got a thumbs up. And, God was with us and has been with us, even this journey we've been on for a year. And so finances can be a really hot button, I think, for a lot of people. I think when the Bible tells us that the love of the money is the root of the evil, it's the love. And it's almost like we pursue that, the finances, the financial stability, more so than we pursue God that can bring us the stability. And so to have faith over it, it is important. It's very important.
A similar situation with us. My husband was out of work for like 8 months, and he was in a job where we had just gotten married, so we had a brand new mortgage payment.
Oh, yeah.
We had bought furniture for our new house. It was, It was stressful, and he was working a job that he didn't like, but he was probably making more money than he'd ever made. But he was so miserable, and he was laid off, and we survived. We scrimped and we continued on, and the Lord really provided for us in ways that we didn't really expect, and then coming out of that, he was able to pursue a job that he'd always wanted, and we've been happy with that ever since.
In looking, like you're able to look back, and we are too now, looking back at some things, and had we not gone through that, we never would have known how God can provide. Jehovah Jireh, our provider. God is our provider. And if you're not in a situation to where you're in desperation, you don't know how he can come through and bring those provisions, bring that provision for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So how about you? Did you ever have a time?
Yeah, my whole life has been a time. No, I'm just kidding.
Hey, I've seen God do a lot of stuff in your life.
No, I think,
Yes.
and that's kind of what I talked about. It's just a heart issue. It's just one more thing for us to want to control. And, God says, open your hands and watch what I can do with this, and it's hard for some of us to do that.
What is the scripture? It says, where your heart, the treasure is,
There your heart will be.
Yeah. There will be your heart.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And the thing about the open hand, it's interesting you mentioned that, because if our hands are open, God is free to put in or take out. But if we're trying to hold on and control and manage that, then it's like he can't do anything with that. He can't put in, and he can't really touch anything because we're holding on to it with a closed fist.
And just the worry and the anxiety that can go along with that for people. That's not how God's called
Like
us
a
to
grip of
live.
fear comes in.
That's not what He's called for
Absolutely.
us. So,
That is so true. That's so true. Well, good deal.
yeah, good job. Well, Stephanie will be sharing with us next week about how.
Faith over your family.
Yes, absolutely. So we're so glad you joined us today. Always remember,
Your heart matters.